Hello, and welcome to my first live stream. So, today I'm going to be talking about a topic that is really close to my heart. It's about burnout and specifically how it happens, what happens inside of our brain, why it burnout actually happens, and what's the correlation between abuse, trauma, specifically childhood trauma, and the proficiency of burnout, which for us happens way more often than in general. So, this is my first live, and this is also a topic that I'm going to be speaking about next week, which means that some of the stuff is not going to be refined. Some of the stuff that I'm talking about right now is going to be completely raw, and I wanted to share it with you so that you get to know more about the topic, but I so that I can also pretty much present. So let's go and let me do the presentation. All right. So, what is burnout? And here I'm going to be explaining burnout in a more neuroscientific way, what is actually happening inside our brain. There's going to be definitely more detailed and more intricate explanations about what burnout is. But in this one, I'm going to be more focusing only on what's happening inside our brain. And the way, the easiest way we can explain burnout, or I can explain burnout, is that it's the disruption of normal brain functions, especially the creation of new neurons. And as a result, nurturing existing and establishing new connections within our brain slows or completely shuts down. And the difference between it either slows or completely shuts down is the difference how long does it take a person to actually go to recover from burnout. So, as I've said in the title, I've been burnt out 2.5 times. So, the first time I was burnt out for about a month and a half, and I had no idea that that was actually burnout. The second time, that was the big one. I was on sick leave for 6 months. Before I went on sick leave, I understood that that was burnout, but only before. And it still took me that long to actually recover. And if I didn't recognize burnout at that point, it could have taken me a year or even more. Some people actually never recover from burnout. And that's one of the worst things that can actually happen. And that was also I was actually afraid that this might happen to me because one of the biggest symptoms of burnout is brain fog. And if you've ever know what brain fog is, it's pretty much your brain cannot do what I would consider quote unquote normal things. As in, um, when my last day on the job at that point was that in 9 hours I was able to do what normally I would have done in 30 minutes. It was that bad. And this is a result of our brains our so new neurons not being actually created, new connections aren't created, or even nurturing new connections also aren't there. Now, before we go straight into what is happening inside our bodies and why burnout actually happens, is we have to understand a few facts about our brain and our body. I'm gonna be just naming these out, and if you have extra questions or you want to learn more about them, just write me down in the comments, and I'll actually create a video just specifically for it. But this is not the time for me to explaining these facts and or just telling that they are true. So the first one is that the primary mission of our brain is survival. Our brain doesn't give a shit about any single thing apart from that we survive. So that means is that you can live in a mansion, the brain's going to be happy it's surviving, but you can also live under a bridge, be homeless. Our brain is still going to be okay with this because we're surviving day to day. It may not be the ideal location or ideal um, surroundings that we're surviving, but we are surviving. Now, the second one is subconscious is in charge. Our subconscious is way more powerful than our consciousness. And our consciousness is actually the result of our evolution. Because throughout our evolution, as a species, we've established that if we have consciousness, if we are hanging out with other people are giving us protection, it's way more beneficial for us. And as a result, there's 8 billion of us in the world, and we are the dominant species on Earth. But in any case, subconscious is in charge, and it is always in charge. No matter whether you like it or not, our subconscious mind is the one that's making all of the decisions. Our consciousness may only help it, if it helps it at all. And our bodies are still in the Stone Age. I'm talking about our physical bodies, as in, we have sped up our technology and everything else, but our evolution is still behind. We are still hunter gatherers. We Because that happened. So the switch and the transition towards us being in cities, having specialized jobs and things like this happened around 10,000 BC when the agricultural revolution started. And then it's when we started to become specialized. But overall, our bodies are still not meant to sit here like I am right now, sit in front of the computer for 8 hours and just talk or do stuff. We are meant to be moving most of the time or all of the time. And then, as I said, technology outpaced us. This, where I have two lights, a camera, laptop, and all of that, I'm talking to people that I will probably never know if I'm talking to anybody at all, pretty much just means that uh, it's strange. We're not used to this, and we don't understand technology. Neither myself or anybody that's watching here understands every single piece of technology that has been produced or has happened in our lives. Now, the way I'm going to explain what happens inside our brain or why burnout happens is through the analogy of a factory, since it's one of the easiest to understand so that pretty much everybody can understand it, and it also really neatly follows the sequences of the way neurons are created and the way actually our burnout happens. So if we look at any factory, there are two main things that happen before a factory can start working. First is it needs to get orders, and then the second one is it needs to get the raw materials. So for our brain, these are the elemental P's and the two M's that we're going to be discussing a little bit later. But when the factory gets these two inputs, it then you can set up the factory. You have to have workers, have to have processes, machines, everything that pretty much enables the products to be produced. And when they're produced, as in this case, the neuron, then it gets shipped to the person or the company that's ordered the product, aka in this case, our brain. And this happens in the hippocampus of our brain. It's a little bit more complex and everything, but this one is the easiest to explain. And when this happening is called neurogenesis, pretty much creation of new neurons. And based on how efficient the hippocampus is, so our factory is, we can actually create 5x the amount of neurons that we normally would have taken. Now, let's go and talk about the six elemental P's, which is the why, actually, the the why burnout happens and how it's happening. So the first one is love and relationships. Here, we're always talking about social connections. We are social beings and we need social connections. And if we look at it, is we have positive relationships negative relationships, neutral, or no relationships at all. So four of them. And the funny thing is that bad or negative relationships are actually bad for you emotionally and physically as well. And I'm not just talking about somebody beating somebody else, but actually it physically hurts you if you have negative relationships. So it's better to have no relationships at all or just neutral ones versus bad ones. Whereas positive relationships, you have a good family, a great girlfriend, fiance, wife, or husband, it actually creates so much positive interactions that it boosts our brain. And as a result, also, it boosts our hippocampus and neurogenesis. And if we're talking specifically here about burnout and about trauma, is just imagine our interactions with our bosses where we work. How easily, specifically myself as well as a abuse survivor, is that if my boss has a negative view of myself and they're pushing me, they're making me stressful, I'm not going to perform as well. I'm going to be questioning myself and I'm going to try and do everything that I can to actually make sure that the boss likes me. So that means I will try to correct the relationship because that's what I've known since I was young. I will always be there to serve him or her so that they're going to be happy with me. And that creates the big issue when we're talking about love and relationship. And also, the last thing about this is it's also the quality of the relationships that matters. We can have tons of friends or colleagues, but if they're just superficial, it's not going to be that positive. Versus if you have one great friend, one best friend, and have an amazing positive relationship, that's going to trump all of the other ones that are just superficial because you just want to count the amount of friends that you have. All right, let's go to the next one. So it's movement. So as I said before, we as a species, we're still hunter gatherers. Our evolution is back in the Stone Age. And what have we done there is we are a species based on movement. We were always moving from place to place. We were gathering berries and hunting pigs, bears, woolly mammoths. Just think of it or name it. And we're not used to just sitting down like I am right now. My whole job is meant pretty much to be in front of the computer, talk to people, and sit down, which is definitely not healthy. So you're always supposed to be moving. So exercise, regular exercise is super important because if we look at our evolution, our brain actually developed because of coordination. Any species that is moving has the beginnings of a nervous system, and that's also us. And so the nervous system, and as a result, later on, the brain evolves because we need to move and we need to coordinate all of these because these are not easy things to do. And the way I am here right now, I am just sitting down, but later on, I'm going to go and I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to do a little bit of that exercise. And what we actually found that it's really important is if you actually put on a sweat, that you start sweating a, l- a little bit. And this actually has a big impact. And it may be just a small thing. So let's say if you live in an apartment, don't take and you live in an apartment that is on the fourth, fifth floor or whatever, don't take the elevator, take the stairs. It's actually going to give you the exercise that you also need. And as a result, your brain is actually going to be younger. You know, the some of the tests that people take, it's like, oh, you're 38, but your brain looks like it's like 32. So this is where all of these things then come into effect as well. Now, the next one, novelty. So novelty is things that we try and do. So new things, traveling, reading a book, doing something that's exciting and not just mundane. It's not the same thing over and over and over again. Because if we live in the comfort zone, if we don't do things, we don't do new things, our brain is actually going to physically shrink. So there is I think, a known disease, and I don't know how it's actually called in English, but a translation from Slovenian is um, lazy brain, specific directly from Slovenia, and I think it's similar here. And lazy brain is pretty much you don't do anything new, you just do the same thing over and over again, and your brain actually stops thinking, and it cannot think. So specifically here, my dad has lazy brain because when you try and explain to him some new concepts, even though they're basic, he will not understand them because he knows what he knows. He doesn't want to think about anything else, and he just lives in the comfort zone. And this is what happens to quite a few people. And novelty is the one that stimulates neurogenesis the most out of these, all of these. So we also tend to call it neuroplasticity, and it can actually 5x the amount of neurons that it actually creates. All of these together are important, but novelty is the one that stimulates it the most. So get out of your comfort zone, read a book, study something new. The best thing to actually do is to learn a new language because this opens a completely different part of our brains, and our brain don't know that language. So if you do that, you are gonna be spot on hitting novelty. Now, the next one is nature. We are a species that evolved in nature, still hunter gatherers. And now, with the amazing technology and buildings that we have, so I'm here in an apartment, but if you can see on my background and all of that, there is pretty much no natural things. So there's no plants and all of that. The reason behind this is pretty much every single plant that I've ever owned has died because I suck at this. But the one thing that I do have is if I look on the left side, I have a window, and out the window, I can see trees and the forest. If I leave this room and go to the living room, right next to the window is a stream and another patch of forest. So I live in nature and I can just go out and enjoy that beautiful greenery, the sound of a stream running and birds and all of that, which is what this is all about. So if you live in a big city, one of the things that you definitely should do is surround yourself with plants, with things that will remind you of being outside. And at the same time, go out. Go out into the sun, go out into a park or something like that, because we do need vitamin D as well. And the other thing is specifically here, when we're talking about being traumatized and abused, is we that have survived this, our amygdala, the one that processes and senses whether we're in danger or not, it actually it actually relaxes and becomes less sensitive. Because all of us who are who have a lot of trauma, CPTSD specifically, our amygdala is the one that is always scanning, and it's way, way, way more sensitive than others. What others don't see as a threat, we may do. And being in nature and like listening and feeling the fresh air, the birds, the stream going, it calms us down. And the longer we are there, and the more we do this, the more relaxed the amygdala is because it doesn't feel danger. And if you still don't believe me for this, just think about any movies or anything like that. If you look at horror movies or stuff like that, what happens in those? Usually you have aggressive music. But if people are in nature, if there were birds singing before, everything stops. And that is when we become alert. Our amygdala becomes alert. And it's the same thing here. When you're in the woods where the birds are singing, the stream is there, our amygdala relaxes because it knows it's not in danger. If there were danger, the birds would not be singing. They would be quiet and trying to hide, and all of the other animals as well. All right. Now, next one. So the next one is omega 3 and a healthy diet. So I'm not going to be talking about a healthy diet because there are thousands of videos telling you what you should eat and all of that. It's just eat healthy. Omega 3, however, is really important. It's the thing that our brain is made of. Our brain is, I think, 72 or 76% made out of fats. And omega 3 is the best fatty acid and the one that has the most effect if we take it enough or if we don't. Our brain is going to suffer. It is the building block of our brain. It's found, of course, in fish and some other foods, but mostly it's the best one is from fish and from aquatic species. So a lot of us don't eat enough of this omega 3, which is, of course, a shame. So, one of the reasons why I have a big bottle of omega 3 pills, I just pop one in every single day. And that at least gives me enough omega 3, even though we know from the pills it's processed, it does not give the same quality or quantity of omega 3, but it's still better than not actually having it. Now, this one, pauses, is by far the most important thing here. We There are three types of pauses that we are talking here about. The first one is you need to take pauses throughout the day. When you're at work, even when you're at home. And the pauses, so a lot of us think that productivity or efficiency when we're at work is having back to back to back to back to back to back to back meetings. And then we say to ourselves, yes, we are productive. It's amazing. But research actually shows that our brain is going to be fried afterwards. So when I was a regional operations director for a food delivery company here in Europe, my Tuesdays were freakingly stupid. From 9 a.m. until around 2:30 or 3 p.m., I had back-to-back meetings. I didn't even have time to actually go to take a lunch break, or I went to the bathrooms if we finished some of the meetings before or not. Then I had like a couple of hours and then another three meetings. So I had like up to between 9 and 12 meetings that day. My brain was fried. I could not do anything. It was stupid, but it was the way it was demanded from me and the way the meetings were. Uh, so Wednesdays, I couldn't do almost anything because I was still recovering from Tuesday. Stupid. But what needs to happen is when you have a meeting, you need to have at least 5 to 10 minutes for yourself. Don't do back to back to back because our brain cannot take it. And especially if we understand the neuroscience behind our brain, we are only productive maximum up to 6 hours. And that is the maximum amount of people who actually first can't do that and they're taking care of their brain. In the majority of cases, we're productive way less than that. And our brain is not operating at peak efficiencies for 6 hours. Sometimes only between 2 and 4. And you trying to work 8, 10, 12 hours is not working pretty much. Um, and the next one is holidays. So I graduated from the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. So the majority of my friends and the people that I interact with are from the U.S. So if you're watching this in the US, you know that holidays and taking pretty much breaks is almost resented, and you can't take them. So here in Europe, we do have the demand that at least once a year you need to take a break of 14 days, so 10 working days. At least in Slovenia, I don't know exactly where other countries lie, but I think the majority of them actually demand that. And actually, the reason is really sound and based on neuroscience and knowing and understanding our brain, because our brain needs to decompress and relax and not be constantly thinking and for our job. So in the US, you usually have 3-day weekends or sometimes even 4-day weekends. One of the things that is not enough. Our brain will not be able to decompress or relax. It needs more than a week to really start decompressing. And for us who have trauma, you can add plus 3 days. So if people that had less trauma can then start relaxing after day 4 or 5, which usually happens for us that have CPTSD and a lot more trauma, add plus 3 days. So we start relaxing day 7, day 8. So, which is why we really need at least those 2 weeks. And then the last one is we need sleep. We need between 7 and 9 hours of sleep. This is where the maintenance of our brain happens. And neurogenesis is mostly happening at night when we're asleep, when our brain is still working and it's chugging out the neurons. We need to get enough of it. And especially the one thing that's really important is that the beta amyloids are getting flushed out. And beta amyloids are the number one cause of our brain degeneration. And this is not something that you can do and say like, oh, I'm not going to be sleeping. I'm going to be sleeping 1 to 2 hours a day, and then after 6 months, I'm going to catch up on sleep. This is not how sleep works, and you can't flush beta amyloids out after the fact. You need to do this daily, so you need daily sleep. I'm going to be honest with you here. I don't sleep well now. I do, but in the past, I've been in the military. I've only slept 1 to 2 hours a day due to trainings and all of the other exercises and stuff that I can't talk about. But as much as you can, you need to start sleeping. If you don't, you're going to get the brain is going to start degenerating faster, and you're not going to be building up that tolerance towards dementia, Alzheimer's, and all of that. So the better here overall, the better you take care of your brain and these 6 elemental P's, the better it's actually going to be for you in the future. Now, these six are the ones that if you don't do them and if you do them poorly, they're gonna degenerate your brain and it's gonna actually cause burnout sooner or later. If you do them well, it's not gonna cause burnout and it's gonna be better for your life. And the way usually burnout happens here when we're talking about this is that you can recover if one of these is not okay. But as soon as it actually comes into two of them, it's going to be an issue. So let's say for me, for my worst burnout, which landed me on sick leave for 6 months, the first thing that went were relationships. So my boss changed. He was an a-hole. Legitimately, 80% of us quit or went on sick leave because of him within the first 6 months. And this one started to deteriorate. And for me, as a trauma survivor, it's also, it compounded. So when my boss was pushing me that I had to do more, that I was useless, blah, 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 whatever, what was happening? I started to panic. My amygdala started to remember all of the defensive mechanisms that I had. And what happened there? I tried to please the person. Right. So I had the freeze response, pretty much, if we're looking at fight, flight, or freeze. And at that point, what I was doing is I cut my pauses. I was working more. Because I was working more, I needed to cut some of the things that I was doing. And this is where novelty comes in place. I was learning Spanish at that time. I cut those 2 hours per week away because I couldn't learn Spanish. I wasn't focused. And I wanted to have those 2 hours to actually work more. Now, what happened was that it's pretty much like a house of cards or a domino effect. All of these just started to crash, and I crashed completely. And the way this happens, the burnout happens in our brain, is pretty much like a factory. If the orders start slowing down, we also start buying less and less of raw materials. Then, in this case, the hippocampus and the neurogenesis start slowing down. And the same thing goes for a factory. Then the output, as in new neurons, there are not enough of them produced. Or if it's the worst, if it's the worst burnout, one of the worst levels of it, it completely stops, and our brain cannot recover. We go into brain fog, and we legitimately are bedridden. So for my worst burnout, I was almost bedridden for like about a month. I couldn't do anything else apart from sleep, wake up. I had a hard time actually just going to my desk and just watching videos and stuff like that. I couldn't even read, and I love reading. And this is the strange cycle of it. Now, what happens? Because a lot of times, let's say you say, okay, I'm in burnout and I've started doing all of these 6 LMNOPs now. I have better relationships. I've cut the relationships that I don't like. I'm moving daily. I'm reading more and doing new things. I'm in nature. I have a healthy diet and omega 3. And I do all of the three pauses that you said, Blash. Nothing's happening yet. Well, this is where the frustration usually comes in, because you can't just cut burnout like switching a light. It takes time. So let's look at the factory again. If, let's say, the factory is shut down because there's no orders and there's no raw materials, it is the same thing that happens in burnout. Now, when let's say there's demand again, which in our case for burnout is we make sure that we do all of the LMNOPs. What happens is we start getting orders slowly in. But when we get the orders, we still need to actually get the raw materials, because you're not going to be ordering raw materials before you get orders, because you're not going to be wasting money. And that's a similar thing is happening inside our brain. So it takes a few weeks. So when I was a plant production director, the majority of our materials were from China, South Korea, and Japan. So it took around 8 weeks from when we ordered them for them to arrive. And when they arrived, they went into the factory floor. And when that happens, the factory needs to restart. You need to get new people, train them, get the quality control aspects in place. And then it starts chugging. So for the factory that I was in, when the raw materials, we started to use the raw materials until we had the finished product, it was 4 weeks. And then we had a new product, or in this case, the brain has a new neuron. And it took us about a couple of weeks to actually, from shipping to when the client delivered it. Here, it's a little bit, here in the brain, actually, funnily or not, it's a similar thing, because the neurons, when they mature and they actually go into the right place, it takes between 2 and 3 weeks. And the thing is, 80% of them are, I'm going to say faulty here. It's not the exact word, but they are faulty. So if we take a look at everything, right? So for the orders to come in, it usually takes a couple of weeks. Then for the raw materials, it took my plant 8 weeks. So that's, let's say, 10 weeks. For us to produce the products, it took 4 extra weeks. So that's 14. And to send them to the client, it's 16 weeks. That is 4 months. I was burnt out for around 6 months. And around the 3, 4 month time frame, it actually started to become better. But it was frustrating because I didn't understand this at that time completely. So that's the cycle of burnout. And how it relates to us as being trauma survivors is this is way worse for us because our amygdalas, our defensive mechanisms are so sensitive. We are prone to more burnouts and more severe burnouts. And nobody understands us. Sometimes also we don't understand ourselves. Okay, so now we have two extra ones, the two M's. What are they? So they are, we can say, almost like brain boosters, which only have a positive effect on us and on neurogenesis. If we don't listen to music, doesn't matter. But if we listen to it, it gives us pleasure and neurogenesis is better for it. The music here is the one that you like to listen to. It's not the one that people love to say like classical music, calming music. No, if you love to listen to rock, if you enjoy death metal, go for it. It's good. Your brain enjoys it, so it's good for you. And the other one is meditation. It's where we everybody knows meditation, so I won't even talk about it that much, but it's where we are in touch with ourselves. If you know Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow, we have system one, system two, and then the third one is the default mode network. And this is in meditation, we actually allow ourselves also to get in touch with that one. If anybody has any questions about the default mode network, I will be happily create another video or even another live. But today is not this is not the time for this. So with all of these, apart from neurogenesis, we also get neuroplasticity, and if we follow all of that, we can have the 5x of our neurons. And the neurons are the ones that make or break our brain and who we are. So this has been a longer presentation than I thought of. So I'm gonna have to actually cut down some of it because I only will have 20 minutes next week to actually present this. But in general, if you understood this, you can now understand what burnout is and kind of how it affects on us with especially with trauma, CPTSD, and PTSD. It's not fun. It is one of the worst feelings ever, especially if your brain is the tool that you use for work, like I do. I don't do things with my hands. I did that before. Now it's only my brain. And if my brain is not working properly, I'm fucked. So there's one of the reasons why I make sure that my brain is healthy and I do everything that I can to make my brain healthy. Of course, there are times that I cheat and don't do everything what it is, but when we are talking about the brain, how it's healthy or not, it is a really crucial thing for us to do for it to be healthy, especially if you're a trauma survivor. And that's it for today. I will see you when I'll see you. Bye bye.